Thank you very much. All righty. Dr. Bernice King, CEO of the King Center here in Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. King, I'd like to thank you very much for sitting down with us today.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate it.
Of course, we are about to embark upon, as a matter of fact, we have embarked upon the observance of your father's 86th birthday. Leading up to the King holiday, 10 days. We just want to let everyone know what's going to happen this year. 2015, you were telling me earlier that you have much pride this year going into it. Of course, tell the folks the theme this year and why you're filled with such pride about it.
It's Remember, Celebrate, Act. We usually keep that as a staple. And the rest of it is King's legacy of courage for our world. When we set out to think about the theme for this year, we were trying to incorporate something that reflected my father's nonviolent philosophy and methodology. And the first principle is nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. And so we decided, well, we need to celebrate that courage, because when you think about next year, meaning now, 2015, we're going to be celebrating the 50th anniversary, where so many courageous individuals stood up to billy clubs and tear gas and horses and all other kinds of attacks for our voting rights. And so that's what we decided to do, not realizing at the time that you would see a whole new generation rise up with a lot of courage to face the issues that are in our face today, such as excessive police brutality, and things of that nature, and systemic issues of racism and economic disparities. And so, it's so apropos, and I feel really good about it, because I didn't even realize that we would be now witnessing this whole new generation of activists who are making their voices heard.
Yeah, you were telling me just how proud you are of them. They are fulfilling what you told me your father, what he gave his life for.
Exactly. He gave his life essentially for all people, but in particular, I think for the next generation, that they would continue a struggle. He knew in his lifetime that some of the things that he was seeking to address would not come to pass, in his life. And so he was willing to make whatever sacrifice so that another generation could reap the benefits, and not just the benefits, but also reap the responsibility of continuing that struggle.
When one visits the King Center, as I did yesterday with you, and thank you so much for being so nice to me yesterday.
You're welcome.
I was outside at the reflecting pool. Of course, very chilly here right now. It was partially frozen, and you still had visitors coming out.
Amazing.
Amazing, yes. And there was a young lady there from Argentina, and she
wow.
told me, she said, my English is not good, but she was so filled, because as we stood out in the courtyard, we could hear your father's voice, talking about the struggle, talking about just working for the betterment of mankind. And I have to tell you, when you take all of that in, and to know we are celebrating his 86th birthday this year, it does so much for one's spirit to know that the struggle continues, as you said, what he died for continues. And of course, when we talk about the events leading up to your father, when you walk out there, and I know you're the CEO of the King Center, but what does it do to you when you hear his voice resonating throughout the years, just exhibiting what he stood for?
Well, sometimes I think when you're close to something, you may not recognize it the same way as people who don't have the benefit of either hearing, seeing, or experiencing it constantly. And so I don't know if I'm immune to it as much as I just know that he spoke so many timeless truths. And so every time I hear him, I'm just in awe. It's like you can always listen to him. There's some people, it's like, okay, shut up. We don't hear more of that. But with him, it's like, say more. You want to hear more. And when I became CEO of the King Center, I realized that, wow, when you come here, you don't necessarily encounter any of his words, whether they be in written form or verbal. verbally, vocally. And I decided that we needed to add sound to the grounds. And we did just that. And that's the experience people are having now. And we wanted to make sure that it was his words coming up to life, speaking to things that are relevant even today, as well as some of my mother's words and even how she created and why she created the King Center. So it gives people an opportunity to understand the grounds that they are standing on, instead of just kind of coming, in essence, to like a cemetery. Because if you think about it, it's like a cemetery. I mean, that's their final resting place. But my mother wanted to be an official living memorial, and so that's why it's important that those words live and breathe as people are on those grounds, and that they are reminded that he spoke so many things that are timeless, that we too can embrace today to help us to continue the freedom struggle.
Yeah, and I would encourage people to go. When I initially visited the King Center many years ago, I was much younger then. It was a great experience. I got to see the writings from jail, things of that nature, and I was able to hear some of it. But yesterday, just being on the courtyard again, I was filled. It was just wonderful. And again, of course, we were there to discuss the events for this year, 2015. Yes. I understand we're starting tonight.
Tonight with a reception at the King Center, 5:30 to 7:30. That's kind of like the kickoff, just kind of welcoming everybody, letting them know we're beginning now the King Holiday Observance, and we do that every year. This weekend is really exciting, though. Perhaps for me, the most exciting part of the whole celebration this year, especially in light of the climate of our times, and that is we are having a race discussion dialogue tomorrow, not just in the sense of hearing people talk from their perspective, but allowing people at tables, circles, to really delve further into the issue and talk about ways in which we can move forward individually and collectively to address the race issues in America. It's entitled The Race Factor, and we entitled it that way because the question is there or there is a race factor that permeates a lot of our society, many of our institutions. And so we need to address, and it's called the race factor, the truths, the lies, and the myths, such as the truth of the matter is that race is a human construct. I mean, we're really just a part of a human race, and we have different hues, but we've created this kind of separation and division through time for certain reasons, and we'll, hopefully delve into that deeply and have an interesting group of people that we are bringing together because I said we can't just do this the normal way where you have the choir singing to the choir. We wanted to bring in diverse voices. And what I mean by that is we have the former governor of Maryland, Bob Elrick, who is a Republican, conservative. So we wanted to make sure that community, that voice is heard. We have a former member of a hate group who's going to be there to really talk about that whole mindset, how you get caught up and trapped in that mindset, and that whole world where we've seen so much pain come from and violence towards others. And then we have, Tim Wise, a white gentleman who's an anti-racism educator and essayist, and he did the documentary White Like Me, and talks about white privilege, and that's a very important issue when you're dealing with race relations. We have Goldie Taylor. Many people know her here in the Atlanta area. She's actually from St. Louis, ironically, and she's a media personality, and also she does a lot of commentary on CNN, etc. Becky Rafter, a white woman, executive director of Georgia One Women's Action New Direction. And then we have a gentleman from New York. He's a producer, Asar Merriman, and he's going to come in and give his perspective. And then Ruby Sales, who was one of the founders of SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating committee, and she is going to be speaking to us as well. And then we have a collection of individuals. After we do this big panel discussion and then dialogues at the table, we're going to delve into this whole criminal justice and police practice. And Dr. Cedric Alexander, who's the chief of police of DeKalb County, will be there. And we know he was just appointed by President Obama to the police. I forget the name of the panel.
Yeah, it was a special panel.
Yeah. And then Charles Alphen, who's one of our trainers in Kingian or Nonviolence 365. He's a former police officer from St. Louis. We have ASAR is going to be on there. Tim Wise, Ladai, or Lady, as she says, Mansfield, who's over Hello Racism. And then there's a retired woman police officer from South Carolina who deals a lot with racism as it relates to policing. And then there'll be a younger panel of Elle Lucier. We've heard her name before here in Atlanta. She's done a lot of the organizing of the demonstrations, the hashtag It's Bigger Than You movement. Charles Rachel, a former gang member out of L.A. who works with the King Center from time to time with our nonviolence training. There's a white gentleman who's a PhD candidate who's actually suffered from police brutality. We want to hear his perspective because we always think about it in terms of the police brutality against black males. But we want to talk about, how white men have been unjustly treated. And then Mary Pat Hector, who is the national director of Al Sharpton's Youth Action Network. And then Becky Rafter, again, will participate in that. So all throughout the day, we'll be dealing with the whole issue of the race factor. And we'll bring an environmental perspective in, too, by Dewan Colion of a group called Pure. And it's from 10 to 5, Ebenezer Assembly Hall. And Sunday at 2:45 at the King Center, we have a book signing with the Friendship Nine, as well as Dr. Cornel West and members of the King family. Really excited because we have played a role, the King Center, in helping the Friendship Nine get their sentences, their cases vacated by the same court where they were convicted almost 50-something years ago. A young lady who wrote a book about their story. They started the whole jail, no bail aspect of the sit-ins during the 60s when students were sitting in at various lunch counters. They decided, we're going to stay in jail. We're not going to take the bail. And they served their time. But then fast forward, people have been trying to find ways to vacate their cases, to throw it out, etc. And Kim came to our summer camp we have every year for young people, 13 to 18, and then we have an adult section as well. And as a part of the study, we look at the letter from the Birmingham jail where my dad talks about just and unjust laws. The reason I'm excited about it is not only will these men have their cases vacated, but Kim went back from the camp and decided to approach the solicitor there in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and said, look, I have a way that we can get these cases vacated. It's under the unjust laws. Dr. King talked about it in the letter from the Birmingham jail. Yeah, I went to the camp in Atlanta at the King Center, and I'm telling you, it'll work. And he was concerned because he didn't want to be in a position where other people would be coming, trying to get their stuff repealed. And he looked at it and he said, this is a way to do it and still keep the dignity of their courageous acts in place. So he's decided to provide that motion. The judge who will be hearing it is the nephew of the judge that was sitting when they were convicted. Wow. The person representing them will be the same person who represented the Friendship Nine 50-some years ago. And I think it's going to potentially have a ripple effect because in my personal opinion, there have been demonstrators and protesters all across the nation now who've been arrested under unjust laws. And so this will perhaps provide them some kind of means to have their sentences vacated as well.
And I want to ask you too, and we'll get back to the rest of the events, but when we talk about people being arrested now for protesting things of that nature, you went to Ferguson.
I did.
You went there, and of course, they spoke highly of you and your efforts coming in, talking about being nonviolent. Give us your perspective on that, and will you be going back?
Yes, we spent several weeks there. Our first approach in any situation is to follow my father's nonviolent philosophy, Nonviolence 365. one of the first steps is an information gathering. You don't go into any situation without gathering information from all sides. So we went in, we met with different members of the community, and just kind of listened and let them know the kind of work that we do, and to feel them out whether this is something they would either be interested in terms of the education and training. Well, they were. And we decided to go back, and we ended up training some law enforcement officers and members of gangs, business leaders, other community activists that are both young and older, and faith-based leaders, all in the same room. And it was tense starting out because some of the protesters felt that, if officers could come in the room with their weapons packing, then they needed to do the same thing. It was unfair because these are the same officers that have abused us, et cetera, and how can we trust them? How do we know they're not going to be up in our face and all that kind of stuff? So we had to work through that issue and help them to understand that by law, these officers had to have their weapons. Some left, some remained, and we worked it out with them, and we let the group decide, do you want the officers here or not? They decided it was better to have them there, and it was good because there were breakthroughs that took place. And so, we gave them ambassador certificates for 2 years. We also went into a school there, the Riverview Gardens High School, and Mike Brown attended there for a moment, not at the time, obviously, when he was killed. And many of the students knew him or lived in that community and had to pass the spot where he was killed every day, or still have to pass that spot. And we educated and trained them as well. Some of them are ambassadors. We're trying to get them here next weekend, in fact, as a further part of their education, as a part of the King Holiday observance. And, we are going back because it's been requested that we train 300 others. One of the gang members wants to have us come in and train 300 other people that he has identified to be ambassadors on the ground there and really work in those communities. And we've been also requested by another school district there to come in and do training with their students and faculty. So it's really exciting, and we will be going back to Ferguson for that purpose.
Continuing to look at the events commemorating your father's 86th birthday. Now, you have what has been called an interactive dialogue, I understand, from Tuesday to Thursday?
Yes. The students from all over the metropolitan Atlanta area from various schools will be coming to the center for 2 sessions, morning 10, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I think elementary and middle schools in the morning and high schools in the afternoon. And they'll have a chance to interact with members of the extended family, King family, as well as people who worked with my father and knew him, as well as my mother. And it gives them a behind-the-scenes look at Daddy. It creates a more human element to my father because, they read about all of the marches and the demonstrations, and they hear about the I Have a Dream speech, but now they get to hear about, Daddy going to college at 15, making a C in public speaking, but now he becomes this great orator. Yeah. They get to hear from it. We had a session several months ago where the young lady who babysat me and my siblings was a part of the session, and the kids were just like, I want to ask the babysitter a question. So it's a more personal touch, and it allows those young people to be able to understand Daddy and Mommy as a human being, and that, like them, they can do extraordinary things in the world. And we try to emphasize the importance of nonviolence in those dialogues. So that will take place Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
Right, from 10 a.m. until 1 o'clock at the King Center.
Actually, one session is from 10 to about close to noon, and the other one's from 1 to about close to 3. So
a lot of activity.
Yes. And it'll be about 240 kids at each session, and it's a multicultural group.
Okay, and that brings us again to Thursday, where at 11 o'clock in the morning, you're going to have the birthday celebration and party in the Freedom Hall atrium.
Yes.
Now, what do you do there?
Basically, we just bring out the cupcakes, and we sing Happy Birthday to Dr. King on that day, in between our sessions with the young people.
And that's Thursday. I can come by for some cake?
You sure can.
Okay,
we'll
great.
let you come by. We don't want the public to come by per se because we only have enough for the kids.
I understand. I do understand. We're going to edit that right there. Did you want me to leave that part out about that? Because if you don't want the public to come, what do you want me to do with that? Leave it in?
Thoughts?
Well, I mean, you can, take it out because you don't want somebody to.
Show up for some cake and stuff. Because they're not going to hear you say we don't want the public to come. You know that, right?
I know how we are.
Okay. We are talking to Dr. Bernice King. It brings us to Friday when we have the State of Georgia Martin Luther King Jr. Advisory Council program. Is that open to the public?
It is, and it's every year at the state capitol that they have a program. The governor, I believe, is speaking this year, as well as my aunt, Dr. Christine King Ferris. She's the only surviving member of my father's birth family, and she's 87 now.
Wow.
Yes.
I saw her when Sunday voting happened at the old Adamsville Rec Center.
I had a chance to see that on the news, in fact.
Yeah, she was beautiful, sporting her Sunday going best.
And she had a hat on, I'm sure.
Never without one. Never without one. And, of course, that brings us to the annual Salute to Greatness Awards Dinner, which is happening on Saturday, January 17th at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in downtown Atlanta.
Yes, and it's the reception starts at 6, dinner starts at 7. We will be honoring President Bill Clinton for his work through the Clinton Foundation, especially the Clinton Global Initiative that he does through that foundation. We also will be honoring the Kaiser Corporation, who happens to be led now by an African-American man who's both chair and chief executive officer, which is substantial when you're talking about blacks in corporate leadership at the top. And then we have 2 Coretta Scott King Angel Award honorees. That Angel stands for Achieving Nonviolence Through Generations of Exceptional Leadership. We honor a young person between 12 and 25 who in some form or fashion is devoted to nonviolence and social justice. And we also honor an initiative that's a youth initiative that either is through a youth organization or it impacts young people. So this year we're honoring Aiden Hornaday, who's a 13-year-old young man, plays the harmonica and ended up just playing it one day, and people started giving him money. And from there, he said, I want to give this money to my children in Africa. Now, he's a child. He was about 8 or 9 then. And I'm saying, you're a child. You're giving money to your children. Mm-hmm. And he started giving this money. And from there, he started realizing, this is something that moves me. I feel called to do this, to be a giver, and to teach people the importance of giving, not just my generation, but older people, and what that does to you as a human being, that all of us can give. It doesn't matter if you're poor or rich, but there's a way that you can give. And so that's a large part of his message and mission, and he's become like a young philanthropist and humanitarian. So he will be honored. And then a gentleman who owns resorts in Florida, Harry Rosen, is going to be he's not going to be honored as much as the initiative, the program that he did there called the Tangelo Park program. Harry Rosen took his profits as a multimillionaire and invested them into this 3-mile radius community where there's a high school, elementary school, and I believe a middle school. And what he has done is to commit from K all the way through college his monies to ensure that nobody has to worry about education. And what it has done is literally turned that community around that was drug-infested, crime-ridden, low graduation rates, and now you have 100% graduation rate. Every child who's in kindergarten, every parent who has a child in kindergarten, they don't have to worry about how do I pay for that. It's taken care of. And there are other supplemental services to help the parents and even help the kids throughout their educational tenure. And when they get ready to go to college, they don't have a headache like, how am I going to pay for it, which we know is a major issue today. Most kids may want to go to college but can't afford it. They don't have to worry about that. Taken care of in that community. Now take that model and think about the many multi-millionaires in athletics and entertainment. If they could figure out how to join forces through their foundations and target communities and say, we are devoting ourselves specifically to this area, this radius, imagine how much turnaround we could do in America in terms of increasing graduation rates, dropping crime, the whole drug infestation, everything. So I wanted to highlight and honor him through the Coretta Scott King Angel Award, because this is an incredible job he's doing to help rid a community of the overtake of violence.
An incredible job you're doing as CEO, because I'm sure that each year this is a huge undertaking.
It is, to say the least. Yes, it is. Keeps us very busy, but it's very rewarding. You know, my parents paid such a dear price. This is the least that I can do for them. And of course, on the holiday, January 19th, really excited about that culmination, because as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, the Voting Rights Act, we're also celebrating that march that took place after Bloody Sunday from Selma to Montgomery's capital. And our speaker this year happens to be the president of Alabama State University, the first African-American female president of that university, who happens to be a preacher. And also happens to be a former president of Delta Sigma Theta sorority.
Yes, she is.
I'll just say ski-oop. How about that?
Okay.
Then Sandy Patty, who's a Christian gospel artist, is going to be singing, has a beautiful voice. There's another group that's going to be singing that uses their voice like Take Six as instruments, but they're all women.
Wow.
It's going to be fascinating. A dance group that has something, and there's going to be something phenomenal that's going to take place with the young people who usually do the recitation. They're going to recite the speech Daddy made at the Capitol steps in Montgomery, but there's some extra pieces that are going to tie into what's going on today with these protests that's going to be very interesting. And we have a special tribute that will be done by David, and I always get his last name wrong, Oyelowo, exactly. David Oyelowo, who plays my father in the movie Selma. He's coming to give a special tribute that day for the holiday at the commemorative service. And then the ambassador from Rwanda, who's a female, is going to give a special greeting on that day. And so it's going to be a very inspiring service that we have on Monday, January 19th, starting at 10 a.m. And it also will be shown live on Fox 5.
Did you see the movie, Selma?
I did.
What'd you think of it?
I saw it twice.
Oh, wow.
Yes. I thank God that Paramount and Ava DuVernay allowed me to have a private viewing very early on with members of my extended family. And it was very difficult first for me to look at because when you are close to a situation, I think you're more of a critic because you say, that's not right, that's off, this is that. So the first time I couldn't see it from an objective standpoint. I was very subjective. But the second time that I saw it, I said, this is incredibly powerful. And, although I feel like there could have been a greater showing of the love that existed between my parents, I realized that this is a Hollywood film. It's not a documentary. Documentaries are designed to really give the real facts of what happened. Hollywood films, there's a lot of dramatic licenses that are taken. But the effort is to bring a period in a story out of history to life. And I think that's what she did. It was really about this Selma story. And although there may have been a few things that were not quite factually right, I think it's very powerful, very moving, and very timely.
Great.
And even though their timing was about Selma, the timing was really about what's happening now in our society with a new generation of activists. And this movie speaks to them.
Dr. Bernice King, I'd like to thank you so much for the time that you're spending with us,
Thank you.
Tell us about the events, to tell us about your involvement with Ferguson, the nonviolent movement that you're pushing for there, just to talk about your parents and the King Center and the job that you have undertaken, which, as you say, is a massive project for you. Good luck to you on it. We look forward to keeping folks abreast on the events as they continue throughout the week
Thank you.
for the 86th commemoration of your father's birthday.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I'm Maria Boynton, and we've been talking to Dr. Bernice King, CEO of the King Center. Thank you.
Thank you.